Do you want to see a UFO over Los Angeles? Well, there was one, and although a film was made called Battle LA, that film was sort of embellished and had big special effects and everything else. But what actually happened with the real version was back in 1942, a UFO was flying slowly over the ocean towards Los Angeles. And obviously back then the Americans were petrified of the Germans and even the Russians. So they put their searchlights on it as it got towards Los Angeles and fired and fired and fired so many rounds of ammunition at this object, which you can see there. It didn't destroy it, didn't do anything to it, and I will explain another time why no weapons can destroy it. Eventually this thing just flew off, but the shrapnel came down and actually hit people's cars where it wasn't hitting this UFO, so you can actually see the UFO there. UFO crash, but wait, you've probably heard of Roswell, but there's probably more to it than that. So some people were saying that the military brought down the ship. Now this isn't it. This is just a fake version of it, because the debris field for the real one was over a mile long. It was smashed into a billion pieces. But they're saying that the military's used this special microwave weapon to bring it down. Now, I have a problem with that. See, I don't believe everything. I have a problem with that because it was over a week, I think, before someone actually found this craft. And it was a rancher. It wasn't the military. You'd think the military would have, with this special technology that they've got to bring down these things, would go and straight away and pick up these things, but they didn't. It was a rancher, and then the military actually admitted it was a UFO, and then later they retracted it and said it was a weather balloon. And yes, we all know about the weather balloon. Let's just look at what the Smithsonian says. Where does it say there? A high altitude balloon. The mainstream lie, and so does the military. So the Roswell crash, I believe that the UFO was brought down because of the lightning that happened on that night. There was a massive thunderstorm around that area. I don't think the military brought it down, otherwise they would have went looking for it. And there were so many eyewitnesses. So even Jesse Marcel, after the rancher contacted the military, Jesse Marcel, which was an intelligence officer, he came along, looked at the debris, looked at the dead bodies, little 4 foot or 3.5 foot aliens, and contacted the local doctors and asked for coffins for children. Marcel also took some of the material home and showed his child this special metal that would unfold back to exactly how it was. But unfortunately, the military then retracted their statement that it was UFO and was told to say it was a weather balloon. UFO crashes in Roswell, there was actually more than you think. There's about 7 between 1945 and 1948. Now, crashes do happen all over the world, and I will do some videos on some of the other ones. But the Americans now actually can bring down UFOs, but obviously they've got alliances with certain types of aliens. So you'll see some footage later on where I'll show a laser beam being shot up into space and a UFO, managing to escape being hit. Now, New Mexico, or Roswell, is quite an interesting place because that is where Dulce, the base, is a secret hidden military base. So that area, New Mexico, is quite important to the aliens for whatever reason. Now, the UFO crash that Bob Lazar worked on could have been one of these 7 ships. Yes, that is the inside of a UFO, and thanks to this guy, Bob Lazar, he gave us the information. So back in the 80s, he was just a very clever guy, didn't work for the military or anything like that, but he knew about propulsion and jet engines and things like that. The military, secret military, needed his help because they couldn't figure out how the propulsion on this worked. So they interviewed him and blah, 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 and eventually he got a job at Area 51. And he worked on the propulsion system, and that's where he told us that there was a thing that powered that called element 115. Now, back then in 85, there was no such thing as element 115, but later on we have managed to synthesize it. So that's what the craft uses, but I'll go into more details on crafts later on. So while working at Area 51, that's where, back engineering the craft, that's where we got fibre optics, because that come from the crafts, and lasers.